I was born in 1943 in Brooklyn, Kings County Hospital. At the time, my dad was in the Army, and my mom was working for the federal government in some type of intelligence thing. I graduated Massapequa High School in 1961. I wrestled all the way through high school. I played some football too. And I went on to Hofstra University. I got a draft notice, and I notified my draft board in Great Neck. I'm still in college. They said, let us know when you graduated. So I graduated in January '66, and right after that, I got another draft notice. So my dad actually brought me down to Fort Hamilton. So they take us into this room. We're about to be inducted into the Army, all of us. And then all of a sudden, these two Marines walk in dress blues. And they looked very impressive. So they said to us, one of them said, we're looking for volunteers for the greatest fighting force in the world. And I looked at them, and a couple of thoughts went through my head. I said, well, I'm on my way to Vietnam, and I bet I have a better chance of surviving with the Marines. And I love to surf, and I'll bet I could surf while I'm in the Marine Corps. So I raised my hand. I didn't know anything about Vietnam. I was a poli-sci major, and I studied, things about communism and fascism and democracy. But on my way to Vietnam, or shortly before, I picked up a book called Street Without Joy. It was a very serious account of how the French had been defeated. So I read that book before I got to Nam. In August of '67, there was a problem down southwest of Da Nang. Well, the first valley we went into was called Happy Valley, and that's where I had my first Marine was killed, a machine gunner, and he was killed by friendly fire. And not only that, he had already finished his tour, and he shouldn't have been with us. And it made me like, it was a horrible thing for all of us to experience that. Then we moved on into another place called the Quai Son Valley, which was called the Valley of the Walking Dead. So we go in, and we're moving along, and Charlie Company has point for the battalion, and Bravo is on the right flank, and I'm point for Bravo. And I'm moving along with my platoon, and we go up on this hill. But Charlie Company, their point platoon is out in this dry rice paddy. And just before they make the tree line, they get ambushed. I mean, big time. And we can't get to them. They're out there by themselves, whole day. It was getting dark. In fact, it got so dark you couldn't see. You couldn't see anything in front of you. They started with illumination, but all you could see was smoke. You could hear the M16s, you could hear the AKs, you could hear men screaming, but you couldn't see anything. Staff Sergeant Head comes down the hill. You could see him, the illumination went off, and he came down the hill. He was like running and falling, but he came down, and he came right over to me and Captain Landis, and he said, you gotta go back up, there's Marines up there and they're alive. So I heard Landis say to the battalion commander, we have to go up. And my Marines were already online, so we started up. But the thing was, we couldn't open fire. I'm in the middle of two squads of Marines, and we're on our way up, and we can't see anything. And I'm telling them to hold their fire. And I really thought, this is it. I'm going to get killed. I really had those thoughts that I'm going to die on this hill. And I was very calm going up, and I was thinking about my parents and my wife. What were they doing right now? Is that weird? We got near the crest of the hill, and the NVA were leaving. They actually were, they were leaving. But my whole squad on the hill, every one of them was hit. Every one was hit. And the machine gunner who had replaced Joe Listorti, he was only with us for 3 days, he was dead. His name was David Calabria from Texas, big kid. So I'm on top of the hill now with my 2 squads. And Captain Landis comes up to the hill. And he shouldn't be there. No, he shouldn't be on, the captain shouldn't be on the hill. And he's standing near me, and I said, I'm going out. We start down the hill, and every once in a while, an illumination round goes off, right? So we freeze, we get down, we freeze. And we got to the base of the hill, and at the same time, we both heard something, and we looked over to our right, and an illumination round went off, and it was an NVA soldier. He was like right where he is, right there. And he was, I guess he was trying to, crawl away. So I got a really good look at him. And he was big. I say, he's about 5'8", really good shape. His hair, close crop hair, handsome. He was wearing khaki pants and Ho Chi Minh sandals, and he was bare-chested. And I didn't see any wounds on him. And this guy Davis alongside of me, he turned to shoot him. And I grabbed his arm and I said, don't shoot him, use your bayonet. And he went over and that's what he did. He got on top of him and used his bayonet. But that young NVA soldier, later on I would think to myself, he's just, he's like the counterpart of a young Marine. I didn't fire a round. But I thought to myself, this is all about luck. It's just about luck. There came a time in the latter part of April, on the north side of the Quaviat, a battle started, and it was big. And we walked right through what was left of the 2nd Battalion, 4th Marines lines. Just like you would see on a movie. You just walk through their lines. There were dead Marines everywhere, and some dead North Vietnamese, but a lot of dead Marines. And as we were advancing, I was moving with Charlie 1, the 1st Platoon. I always moved with them because a good friend was the platoon commander, Lieutenant Higgins. And we were moving along, and we came across, I called it a ditch, but it really wasn't a ditch. It was about 30 feet long, about 6 feet wide, maybe about 5 feet deep, and it was filled with dead Marines. But every one of them was facing outboard and still in a fighting position. They just died, right, and with multiple wounds. And the NVA were falling back so fast that they didn't take any weapons. They didn't mutilate anybody. But I did watch the chaplain was actually, we have one chaplain for each battalion. Chaplain was actually moving with us. And I watched him go down into this deep ditch. And I watched what he did. He took his index finger and his pinky and he closed the eyes of all the Marines. A crazy thing. We're in a graveyard, in a Buddhist graveyard, and the graves are like 10, 12 feet high. So it's great cover. And we had a forward air controller was above us. And in one of those little Piper Cubs, he was circling around us, and he radios down, and I'm near the captain, and I can hear all the traffic. And he says, "You got to pull back." He says, "I've never seen anything like this. There are thousands of them, and they're coming right at you." So all of a sudden, me and the gunny are by ourselves in the graveyard. I look forward, and the MVA are now coming into the graveyard. And there's nobody around, just me and the gunny. And I just said to him, "Well, I'll cover you and you cover me." So we had to like leapfrog back a couple of 100 meters by ourselves. It was one of the most frightening things I've ever done, because every time I turned my back, I thought I was going to get shot in the back. We did it. The gunny reached our lines first, and then I had to go like maybe 20, 30 meters more, and I ran like hell. I was so frightened. And as I was approaching the lines, I heard these two loud blasts, shotgun blasts. Lieutenant Higgins, who had the first platoon, he comes over to me and he says, "Do you know what just happened?" I said, "No." He says, "I got two of them that were right behind you. They were right behind you." Turns out, we didn't know this, we were fighting 8,000 North Vietnamese. And they had something in mind. I think they wanted to cross the Qua Viet and overrun the Dong Ha combat base. It would have been a disaster if 8,000 of them had moved into the perimeter. But it turns out in Marine Corps history, it's one of the battles that they mention at the Marine Corps History Museum is the Battle of Dai Do. The last place before Vietnam was Okinawa. I was waiting for my flight to go out. Actually, we were being held up because of a typhoon. And I look over and I see at the bar my commanding officer. He was Captain Duffy. So I went over to him, and he's complaining to me about how he hasn't been able to get to Vietnam, and he's a career officer, and he needs time on the line, in combat. And I left, he was really angry. I left to go to Vietnam. In December of 1967, and we're on a hill in Vietnam called Alpha 3. We established the combat base, my battalion, 1st Battalion, 3rd Marines. It was just below the DMZ. And they start shelling us, and it was horrific. It was really bad. We had to basically stay underground all the time. If you came out, you can get killed doing anything. That's how bad it was. I get a radio call from battalion saying that Major Duffy has joined our battalion. Major Duffy, and now he's a major. I go into the hatchway, and there's Major Duffy sitting right in the hatchway. And there was like a place where you could sit, and I said hello to him, and I walked in, spoke to the battalion commander, and on the way out, he was still sitting in the hatchway. And I thought went through my mind and said, I hope he's not gonna, settle in the hatchway, because there was where he was sitting was big enough to, lay down and sleep. And I walked away, right? I walked away, went back to my bunker, and we got hit with another barrage of artillery and rockets, and they radioed down, and that he had been killed. Duffy, they wrapped him in his poncho rotation, and they brought him over to the LZ, and the last I saw of him was they were loading him on a chopper and sending him back to the Okinawa, which was an aircraft carrier. When they brought him back to the Okinawa, a Marine officer saw the chopper come in and saw them unload the remains of Duffy. Shortly after that, this Marine officer, a few days later, gets on a chopper and he flies to Alpha 3. So he makes it to the command bunker, and it's incoming, and he goes into the hatchway and he runs over, gets under a table. Under the table is the battalion commander. They're both under the table, and he says, the battalion commander says, "You must be Lieutenant Jones." And he's like, "Sir, yes, Lieutenant Jones, reporting for duty," or something like that. And the first thing the battalion commander says, "See, that hatchway over there? Major Duffy was killed there a couple of days ago." These are letters that I wrote to my wife. These are all letters while I was in the Marine Corps. But I have another box of letters that I wrote to my dad, my mom, my sister, and some of my friends. So what happened is in 2002, all these letters were returned to me by my ex-wife, 2002. And at the same time, by coincidence, my mom returned all the letters that I wrote. These letters start in Nam. The letters I wrote to my mom started in boot camp in Paris Island. So all of a sudden, in the summer of 2002, I had these letters. I had no idea they saved them. So I started reading them. And something happened. One day, Nikki walked in and she said to me, "You have to do two things for me," meaning her. "You have to get help. And why don't you write?" And I did it. She saw something that I didn't going on, and I didn't sense it or anything. So I got into a writing class in September of 2002 at Southampton, which I've never done. I never wrote anything, and I got into counseling at the same time. And I went to counseling, on a regular basis, but then the counselor said, "You have post-traumatic stress disorder," and I got angry, and I stopped the counseling. This was in 2002. But I continued with the class. So the first story I wrote was Double Time Duffy, about Duffy and what happened to him. So the writing, which I didn't realize, is another form of therapy. There's a lot of vets right now, and all of them, I think, claim it's some form of therapy. The VA discovered something, just a routine exam up in the clinic. They did an EKG, and the doctor, it's very strange. He takes me out into the hallway and he says, "You have an abnormally low heartbeat." And it turns out that I had this really bad heart disease called chronic ischemic coronary heart disease. I started doing a little research about Agent Orange, and sure enough, the VA came out with a new reg specifically addressing what I had. And they said, if you have this and you were in Nam, it's presumed that Agent Orange gave it to you. So I added another claim, Agent Orange. And I'm at the point now where I'm over 100% because I can't work anymore between the heart disease and the loss of hearing. And Agent Orange is, I call it the agent that keeps killing. I never really said I was bitter about, anything about Nam, but the Agent Orange thing really bothers me. Because those motherfuckers, I'm talking about the government, they never told us anything about Agent Orange. There was no such phrase when we went to Nam. We knew they were using some type of defoliant. We knew because we saw them spraying it. We were drinking Agent Orange. It was in the water. We were bathing in the Agent Orange. And we had no idea what we were doing.